Thank you for joining us. Today's program is Research Tools and Tips Using DNA to Break Through Brick Walls.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about using DNA to break through brick walls. So I'm just going to go ahead. And like Dougie said, I serve as the historian of the African American Genealogical Society of Fort Wayne. I have been doing research since 1996. So it's been a minute. But we're just going to get into it. Let's see if I can share. So again, we're going to be talking about using DNA to break through brick walls. So we're going to talk about why do people DNA test, the different types of tests, how DNA can be used in conjunction with traditional research. And then I also will go through the process I took to uncover the identity of my great-grandmother, Emma's mother, and how I found the connection to DNA matches. And so first we want to understand, why do people DNA test? One reason is for the ethnicity part of it. And we've come to find out that most people take the test for this reason. And then adoptees take the DNA test to find their biological family. People take the test to locate family or connect with family. And also to break down brick walls in research. And then you can also use DNA to confirm research. And so I'll be talking about breaking down a brick wall and confirming research. And then so there's several different DNA companies that you can test with. There's Ancestry, which is an autosomal test. And there's 23andMe, MyHeritage, and it's also autosomal. But with MyHeritage, you can also upload your raw DNA. And then Family Tree DNA, it's also autosomal, but they also have a Y DNA test and an MT DNA test. The Y DNA test is a paternal test, where test male to male to male. And then MT is the female line. You can also upload your raw DNA to this site also. And then there's also living DNA. It's an autosomal test, and you can upload your raw DNA over there. And then Ancestry is the test that I took. So we'll be talking about the Ancestry test. But if you tested with Ancestry, you're thinking about testing with Ancestry, there's some things you would want to do. When you test, you would want to link a family tree to your DNA results on Ancestry, because this is going to help you to get hints and things of that nature. Then you also want to build out your family tree as far as you can, because this is going to help you also to find common ancestors you share with your DNA matches. And this also will help in regards to the through line feature, which is a feature on Ancestry, and we'll talk about that later. So then once you test, what a lot of people ask, well, what my results will tell me. So first, your results is going to tell you your genetic makeup, which is that famous ethnicity estimate. And then it's going to tell those who are genetically related to you, which you're going to get a match list. And it's going to list all the people who share DNA with you. And this list starts with your highest match down to your lowest match, according to how many centimorgans you share. And then your matches are also broken down into categories, which are like immediate, close family, and distant family. And then it's also going to tell you common ancestors. So it's going to give you possible common ancestors you share with your DNA matches, providing you have a family tree linked to your DNA results, and they do too. And then you also can use your match list to search for specific birth locations. And then you could also use your match list to search for specific surnames. And also you can use your match list to find relatives and connect with relatives you did not know you had. And like in the case of our chairwoman, Roberta, and myself, Roberta and I are not a DNA match, but she's a match as my mom, my niece, my first cousins, and several first cousins once removed, and other relatives who have tested match other members of the Ridley family. So, and also when you DNA test, you want to make sure that you DNA test as many people as you can, because it's going to be beneficial in the long run. Because like I said, Roberta doesn't match me, but she matches my family members. And so there she is with all of my family members that she matches. So she matches like 6. So like I said, we're not a match, but she matches all of them. So we're connected somehow. We haven't figured out the connection, but we're matching somehow. And then so also you can use your DNA to confirm your research, and it's used to break through a brick wall or break through brick walls. So breaking through a brick wall. So that's what we're gonna talk about. So what is a brick wall? So a brick wall is nothing more than a tough research problem, apparent dead ends that after many hours of searching still yield no answers. So how do you attempt to break through a brick wall? So first of all, what is it that you're trying to find out? So that's the most important thing, is what is it that you're trying to find out? That's going to help you to be able to break through the brick wall. So you want to establish a research question. And so a research question is just a question of what you're trying to find out and forms the basis of your research. So examples, who was Betty Jones's mother? When did Uncle George die? Was my ancestor enslaved? Where was great grandpa born? Those are just some examples of research questions. And then you will try to answer it. In order to try to answer it, we want to ask ourselves, what do we already know? And so we want to write down what we already know. Then we want to develop a research plan and create a timeline. And your timeline and that research plan is going to help you stay organized. It keeps you from repeating research, and that you see what you already know and then what you need to do next. And when I first started researching, I wasn't doing no research plans, no timelines, and none of that stuff. So I found myself repeating my research. I'll be at the library here at the Allen County Public Library, looking up stuff and thinking I found something new. And then I get home to discover I already had that information. And right here is just a sample of a timeline. And this is one that was that Dr. Shelley Murphy, Family Tree Girl, that she created, and I like to use it. This is the one format that I use as far as timeline. And then so the case study. So my brick wall was, I wanted to know who my great grandmother, Emma Grizel Cadwell's mother, was. And after doing research, I could not find any information that listed her, that told who her mother was. So what I had to do is I had to start with what I know. And so I knew that her name was Emma Grizel, or Grizella Cadwell. Okay. And Emma was born according to census data about 1882 in Georgia. From oral history, I know that her father was Martin Thomas Cadwell, and it has been confirmed through DNA. And on the picture over here, you'll see her father, Martin, and then that's Martin Jr., and then Mary Curry, his wife. And then from oral history, I knew that we are Cadwell Birch. And then I know Emma married Henry Wells. And then Cadwell oral history states that her father was Martin Thomas Cadwell, which we've confirmed, and he married twice. And Mary Curry is his second wife. And oral history says that his first wife was a Lilia de Long, de Young, de something. And this union produced two children, Emma and a son, Gordon. And then he married Mary Curry. And then Wells' oral history states that Emma's mother was a woman named Ophelia, and she was Cherokee Indian. So when I got researching in from oral history, I thought the Cadwell Birch part was because of this, because my third great grandfather Grip and his brother, they both were enslaved on the Birch plantation. And when Mr. Birch passed away, Grip went with his daughter, and she eventually married a Cadwell. So after emancipation, Grip took the Cadwell surname but his brother Martin kept the Birch surname. So I thought that's how we were Cadwell Birch. But that's really not the case, and we'll get into that later. But that's how I thought we were Cadwell Birch. But in a sense, we are, because the one brother's Birch and the other brother's Cadwell. So I started delving in doing research about Emma, because I needed to research her to see if anything that pertains to her would tell me who her mother was. So the first thing I went and tried to figure out was a marriage record for Henry and Emma, to see if maybe it was who her parents were, but it didn't. But Henry and Emma, they were married in September 6, 1903 in Lawrence County, Georgia. And this is the funny part too, because to me, I would pronounce that Lorenz County, but on most of my stuff, my grandfather's records, it said that his birthplace was Lawrence County. So when I got to searching Lawrence County, I didn't find no Lawrence County. There ain't no Lawrence County, Georgia. But the reason why I didn't find it, because it's actually Lorenz. And then I was talking to someone from the Georgia Genealogical Society, and they said, no, they don't pronounce it Lorenz, it's Lawrence. So that's what the mix-up was with that. So I was able to get that straightened out. But I searched her marriage record, and I didn't find anything. So I went on to the census, and this is a 1910 census with Henry, and he's listed with Emma, which on this census she's listed at Grisella. And then there's Martin, which is a son, and that's my grandfather. Then there's Lilia, which is a daughter. Then there's Alice, a daughter. Sophie, a daughter, and then Gladys, a daughter. And then one of the things that I tell people, you want to look for naming patterns, because as I was looking for at this census, when I was trying to find Henry's parents, I just had in my mind, I was like, well, wait a minute. So I searched for Henry, and I found a Henry in the household of a Wynne Wells and a Alice. And I found out that Alice was a Mormon. And I was like, wait a minute, maybe Henry named his daughter after, his mother. And that was the thing. So the naming patterns. And then I looked at my grandfather. I was like, wait a minute. They named my grandfather after his grandfather, Martin Thomas Cadwell. My grandfather is Martin Thomas Wells. So those naming patterns. And then the daughter, Lily. So I'm like, So I was like, so that might tell me something. So we want to look at the naming patterns too. And those naming patterns are something we want to look at. And then I kept going on to throughout the census to see if maybe I could find something. So I just kept on, and here they are in the 1920 census, and more children had been born to Emma and Henry. And then oral history states that Emma and Henry, they passed away somewhere between 1920, 1930. So after the 1920, I couldn't find them anywhere. And they said that after Emma and Henry died, the Wells children were split up between the Cadwell relatives. And so I found that to be true, because in 1930, we'll find America Wells, which is my great aunt, is now in the household of her great uncle Columbus Cadwell in Lawrence County, Georgia. And then great aunt Apolly Wells, she's in the household of Martin, her grandfather, and they're in Camden, New Jersey. And then also my grandfather, he's in his own household, married, and in the household is his brother James and his brother Henry are with him. So after all that, I still didn't find anything that would list who Emma's mother was. So I thought, and I had some other brick walls too. So I thought to myself, I'm going to take the DNA test to see if I could figure out how to break down some of these brick walls using DNA. So also another thing you want to take into consideration too when you DNA test, that you want to be ready for maybe some surprises, because in DNA testing, I also found out that I had an MPE situation, that my dad is not my biological dad. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, because that's how I found the connection to some DNA matches. But we're going to shift our gears to DNA. So I DNA tested, and I had my match list, and I pretty much knew a lot of who my family, some of my known family members But in my DNA match list, I had this one DNA match that I share 51 centimorgans with, this JH. And so I'm like, well, how is he connecting? And I went to his tree, and the location where he was at was in Dublin, Georgia, which is Lawrence County, Georgia. But he was descending from this Lumbia birch. And then so I found another DNA match, AHJ, and she also had the same Lumbia birch in her tree. So I'm like, well, who is these people? Because they're not matching any of the Cadwell relatives. So I was like, well, who are these people? And I tested my mom. So I go over to her test results. And so she's also matching JH at 54 centimorgans. And then she's matching AHJ at 40 centimorgans. And so I'm like, okay, so who are these people? Then I keep, so this is JH's tree, and you'll see that he descends from Lumbia Yonks, and then there's a Jordan Yonks, and Katie Birch are her parents. And so that's who she's descending from. So they have the same couple, Henry White and Lumbia Birch, and Jordan and Katie. So I'm like, well, who are these people? So I continue to search the DNA matches for the Birch surname. And so I go to on my test. Centimorgans are is how they measure the DNA, is the amount of DNA that you share. It's just the measurement tool that they use as far as DNA. And then so I go, I search for the Birch surname, and then this other match comes up, AH comes up, and she's sharing 31 centimorgans. So I'm like, and she also had Lumbia Birch in her tree. And then so I go to my mom's tree, and she also had AH in her tree, but AH and my mom are now sharing 148 centimorgans for DNA over 4 segments. So I was like, well, that's a pretty high match. And then so I look at my niece's kit, and she's also a DNA match to AH, and she's sharing 46 centimorgans. So I go to her tree. Like I said, again, has Lumbia in her tree, and Lumbia is her grandmother. And so I'm like, well, who is this Lumbia Birch? And then also, there's another DNA match at LH, which I found out is AH's son, but he only matches my mom and my niece. And he matches my mom at 40 centimorgans and my niece at 14. But again, there's Lumbia Birch again. So the question was, now, who is this Lumbia Birch? So who is Lumbia Birch? And that's her, their picture with her family. She's in the middle. So I had to figure out who Lumbia Birch was. So I knew from the trees that they had that her parents were this Jordan Yonks and Katie Birch. So I went and searched for them. So I came across this 1870 census, and I found Lumbia with her parents, Jay Yonks and Katie, in the census. And I also discovered that she had a sister named Liller. So I asked myself the question, could Liller also be Lilia? So I was like, well, let me go look at 1880. So, but before I do that, I also in the 1870 census, one thing that when we're doing our research, we want to make sure we're using our fan club, which is friends and family, associates, and neighbors, because it could give you clues to some things. So when I looked at the 1870 census, I looked at the households on this census, and the first one of the households on the same page with Jay, Yonks, and Katie and Lumbia's family, there was Griff Cadwell, which is my third great grandfather, and there he is with his family group. And I'm like, okay. And then there were some other Birch families that were also on this census also. And from research, I found out that they are connected. So we want to make sure that we're using that, the fan club. But then I get to the 1880 census, and Katie, or Kate, is now head of household and is listed as being widowed. And Lumbia is not in the household because I found that she had went on and got married, but Liller is now Lilia. So I'm like, okay. So then I asked myself the question, well, where is Jordan? Um, when did he die, since Katie is listed as being widowed? So I was like, well, where is Jordan? So I turned my focus to go to research Jordan. So when did Jordan die, or did he? Because when I searched for Jordan to try to see if I can find a death record for Jordan, um, I came across this 1900 census with a Jordan J. DeYounts, born 1836, was listed in the household of a Henry Clark as Henry's stepfather. So I'm like, well, okay, so how is this my Jordan? And so how is he connecting with Henry? Because there's no mother. Henry doesn't list the mother here. So I'm like, well, how is he his stepfather? So I continued to go ahead and research Jordan. And then that's when I found a marriage record of a Jordan DeYounts and a Retta Clark. And so Jordan DeYounts married Retta Clark on the 16th of January, 1879 in Lawrence County, Georgia. And so I'm like, okay. And then I also was looking at this particular record, and I noticed that the minister of the gospel who actually married them was Grip Cadwell, my third great grandfather. So I was like, oh, that's awesome, because oral history also states that he told a family member that he was called to preach. And so that's what he was doing. He was going around preaching and also performing marriages. So, but then the light bulb went off in my head when I found this record, because I was like, wait a minute, Jordan DeYounts. Because I went back to the Cadwell oral history. They said that Emma's mother was a Lilia DeYoung, DeLong, or D something. And that she also had a son named Gordon. So I'm like, wait a minute, could this be, what I'm looking for? And then so I took my focus to Lilia now. And then so I found a Lilia in Pickering, Coffee County, Georgia. And she's married to on this census it says Ander, but it's actually Andrew Birch. And in the household is a Golden Birch, a Wesley Birch, a Henry Birch, and a Joe Birch. And then according to this census, Lilia and Andy have been married for 10 years. So I'm like, okay, they've been married for 10 years. And it says that Lilia was the mother of 9 children, only 8 living. So I continue on and I get to the 1910 census. And on this census, it tells you how many times a person has been married. So in this census, it lists Lilia as being married twice. And Lilia and Andrew are listed as being married for 16 years. And then now son Golden is now Gordon and is 18 years old. But if you notice now, Lilia and Andrew only listed as being married 16 years, but Gordon is 18. So is Andrew his father? Is the question that I would have. So then there's another little thing I like to utilize when I'm doing my research, and it's the cousin calculator. And then so this is the cousin calculator, where you put in this corner up here the common ancestor. You'll list the common ancestor. Then if you have 2 siblings, you'll take the one sibling across and one sibling down, and then you can go across and try to find the relationship in regards to to each person. And so this is a chart that I utilize in doing my research, especially dealing with my DNA matches. So I knew that that these DNA matches had Jordan and Katie in their tree, and they had the daughter Lumbia, and then they had the daughter Lilia. So my question was, could Lilia possibly be in my great grandmother Emma's mother? So I use this chart. So I go ahead and I put at the top going across, I put Lumbia, and then I listed, because since AH was the highest DNA match to that couple that we had at 148 to my mom, I put her there. And then her son is LH, I put him there also. And then so I go down, I listed Lilia, then I went to Emma, then I went to my grandfather Martin, to my mom Kathleen, then to me. And then I brought my mom across to AH to see if that was the possible case, what relationship would they be? And according to this cousin calculator, said they should be second cousins once removed. So I was like, okay, so let me go to another tool that I like to use, which is over at DNA Painter, and it's called the Shared Centimorgan Project, and it was created by Blaine Bettinger. And so I inputted 148 centimorgans, which shares with my mom. And so it's told me that the relationship, that possible relationships would be a half second cousin once removed, half first cousin 2 times removed, first cousins 3 times removed. And so according to the cousin calculator, AH is a second cousin once removed. And then I also inputted how much DNA I shared with her. And so it said I should be a half second cousin 2 times removed, 1 time removed, or second cousin 2 times removed, or a half cousin a half first cousin 3 times removed. But according to the cousin calculator, we should be second cousin 2 times removed. So then I turned my focus over to through lines, and a lot of people who have DNA tested and are doing research, they don't like to use the through lines feature. And please forgive me because I forgot to mark out these folks, but yeah. But when you're doing, you don't want to make sure you mark out your DNA matches for privacy reasons, but for some reason they're not marked out. But I went to the through lines for Katie Birch, and so this is a list of Katie's children going across. So Katie had a son named Washington Birch, and then of course Lumbia, then Lilia, and then Sarah. So out of all these children, there are different DNA matches that descend from each one of these, through each one of these kids. And I share DNA matches according to their trees were connected. So again, this is through line, so it just goes ahead and tells you the DNA matches. So there's other DNA matches that also descend from Katie Birch and some from Jordan. And again, this is some more DNA. This is the Lumbia Birch line. So we have Clara White, which is Lumbia's daughter, and there's 5 DNA matches from that line. And then Grant White, there's a DNA match from that line. And then Bailey White, there's a DNA match from that line. And then Nora White is which she descends from. But Jacob Coates, that descends from JC, that descends from Grant White, he's also a DNA match over at 23andMe. So I just continue on. So I was able to confirm, the different relationships to Katie Birch and Jordan. So I was able to confirm, that relationship, that Lilia was in fact Emma's mother. So then, as I stated before, I discovered that I had an MPE situation. So when I DNA tested, I found these DNA matches that were kind of high. So I'm like, well, who are, these DNA matches and how they're connected? And so I did all my research, and I finally figured out how I was connecting to the Sneed surname, but I still could not figure out how I was connecting to these Sneeds. So in my research, I found out that my paternal grandfather's name was well, first of all, when I look at DeE Sneed's tree and L Sneed's tree, they had L Sneed had this Ernest Sneed in his tree, and then he descends from an Ernest and a UG Bacter. And so I'm like, well, who are these Sneeds? And then with DeE Sneed, she didn't have a tree. And you're going to run into that problem dealing with DNA matches. Some of your DNA matches will not have trees. So you're going to have to go in there and build their tree out for them, to build it out so you'd be able to see what's what. So that's what I had to do. I had to go in here and build out her tree because her tree was private, and I contacted her and I can get her to respond. So I had to build out her tree. And so how I went about building out her tree was I used some online things. Of course, I used Google. And the first thing I found using Google, Googling her name, was I found the obituary for her mother, which listed her in the obituary. So I was like, okay. So I found some other people that was also listed in the obituary. And then so another site that is a site that I use a lot is truepeoplesearch.com. And so on this site, it's going to give you address, phone number, possible relatives, and associates. And then I also use whitepages.com and also Facebook. But True People Search is the site that I use the most. So here, you go here and you put in a person's name. And if you know the location where they live, you can put that. And I use myself as example. So I put my name in here. So it says that my age is 45. I was born in July of 76. And it gives you an address, phone number. But then the thing that I particularly pay attention to is the possible relatives and the possible associates, because that's going to give you clues to some things, because that's how I was able to build out DeE Sneed's tree, because of those possible relatives and also knowing the people from the obituary. And then so like I said, I found out that I was a Sneed. So my grandfather, I found out through research, was Marion Sneed. And so in my research, I found his death certificate, and it listed his parents as a Johnny Sneed and a Lily Sneed. And so I went through and I looked at all the information on the death certificate. And then also the informant was Sally White, which through research, I found out was his wife, Clara May, her mother. But the thing I wanted to find out was the connection to these Sneeds. So on here, his father was Johnny Sneed and his mother Lily Sneed. So I'm like, well, who are they? So I tried to search the census for them, for Johnny and Lily, but it yielded nothing. But in my DNA matches, when I was looking up the Sneed, searching for the Sneed surname, I found some DNA matches that were descending from this Rufus Sneed. But the problem is that the naming patterns, these folks kept naming their kids John. So John. One brother named their son John, the other brother named his son John, and the John just kept going on. But the one key was this Rufus Sneed kept showing up in the DNA matches tree. So I had to try to figure out to connect these Sneeds. So that's what I had to do. But like I said, I was searching for Johnny and Lily, and it yielded nothing. I went back to the 1930, because I knew that Marion, he was born in 1911. So I thought I can go back to 1920 to see if I can find him in 1920. And I could not find him in the 1920. And I could not find Marion also, or Johnny, or them in the 1930 census. So I'm like, well, I know they had to be here. So where are they at? So I searched, but then I went back to Family Search, and I said, let me go back to Family Search and see if I can just do another search again for John Sneed, and just put a Lily in there to see what I pull up, because I didn't know Lily's maiden name. So I went in, I did a search for John Sneed, just put Lily as his spouse. And that's when I found this marriage record for John Sneed, who married a Lily Matthews, but this was kind of transcribed as Mathis, but it's actually Matthews. So they were married the 2nd of December, 1911. So I looked at the witness on here, and it was a Will Matthew. And I'm like, well, who is this Will? So I'm like, okay, so now that I have this, so could this be the couple that I'm looking for? So then I went on ahead and searched for Lily Matthews. And in my search, that's when I found that Lily married again. She married a Jesse Dillard, and they were married July 21st, 1923. in Rutherford County, Tennessee. And then I kept on researching, and that's when I found her death certificate. She died on March 22nd, 1926. And lo and behold, her father's name is Will Matthews. The death certificate lists her father as Will Matthews. And I'm like, so that's how he is connecting. So I was like, okay, so who is this Will? So I wanted, since I know that she was dead, so I was like, well, let me go search for this Will to see if I could find out anything about him. So I searched for him. And so I found this 1870 census of this household. In this household is a Park, Matthews, Allie, a John, a Kate, a George, a Fanny, Molly, a Oni, a Willie, a Johnny, and a Pink. And so Willie, I was like, so is this Willie in this census? Is this the Willie that I'm looking for? And then so I continue on searching for Will, and that's when I came across the 1900 census. And so here you have Will, he's listed as being Billy, but here he's listed with his wife Lavinia, and then there's a daughter, Martha Beckton, and then there's a Lily Mathis. This is the census that their mothers or whatnot, and then there's a son George, and then there's a son B Jordan, which is a son. But then I was like, well, no, but on here is listed as, he's listing her as his, Lily is listed as his stepdaughter. So I'm like, well, maybe he's not the one giving the information. Maybe it's Lavinia that's giving the information, because I also figured out that Lavinia is not Lily's mother. So I was like, well, maybe she's the one that's giving the information. But here we have Lily in the household with this Billy, which I found out that is Willie. So I continue on. So I said, okay, well, this Matthews name, surname. So I said, well, let me go over to my DNA matches and search for Matthews. And then so I go over to my DNA matches. And like I said, in your DNA match list, you can do a surname search, where it searches the surnames in your matches tree. So that's what I did. I inputted in Matthews. And so it gave me a list of my DNA matches that had Matthews in their tree. And so here I found a DNA match, AS, and we shared 40 centimorgans of DNA. And then so, and when I was looking at his tree, I went back, and so I seen that he's descending from John Matthews and Lucy Emma Wade, but John Matthews' parents are John Matthews and a Kate Robertson. And so I'm like, so I continue on searching, the other DNA matches for Matthews. And I also found another DNA match that MW, and we share 22 centimorgans of DNA. And he also descends from John Matthews and Kate Robertson, their son, John, and Lucy Wade. And so I'm like, okay. So I was like, what? So then something stopped me in my track. I was like, wait a minute. Where have I seen this John and this Kate at before? This John Matthews and this Kate at before. So I was like, I seen him in the 1870 census. So I went back to the 1870 census, and sure enough, there was John and Kate. And then there was some other people listed, and I found out that them was in fact their children. So then you see there's Johnny, which those DNA matches they descend from. And then there's Willie. So I was able to kind of confirm that this Willie is actually Will Matthews, the father of Lily. So I continue on researching, and then I go back to my cousin calculator to figure out what our relationship would be. So to AS is saying that we should be fourth cousins once removed, and the same thing it would be with MW. And so here's the DNA painter when I went in and put it the amount that we shared over here, and sure enough, it's fourth cousins once removed. So I continued on searching for Will, William, or Matthews in the census. So then that's when I came across this 1920 census, and I looked at the census, and so I seen looking at the people that was listed in the household. So there was Vinya, his wife, and there was a Jonas Matthews, then a Robbie Lee Matthews, then there was an Alex Matthews, a Marion Matthews and a James Matthews. The last three were listed as being grandsons, and my jaw kind of dropped because there was Marion. And so I was like, the reason why I couldn't find Marion in the census, because he wasn't Marion Sneed, he was listed under the name Matthews. And so I continue on to the 1930 census, and now Marion is now in the household of George Matthews, which was his uncle. And also in the household is Vinya, which would be his grandmother. So then there's Marion, and then there's also an Ernest that's also in the household. And there you would see that it says grandson, but if you can see faintly, it says nephew. So I don't know who gave the information. Vinya was the one that gave the information. So they was like, that's grandson, but then they put nephew because they got it straightened out. But in fact, they are George's nephews. But then I also found that Will Matthews is now enumerated in the county poorhouse, and he dies the 14th of May, 1930, about 3 weeks after the census was taken. So he was in the poorhouse, which I guess they would consider like a nursing home. But he dies in 1930. So I go back to DeE Sneed and L. Sneed, because if you remember, I said that in their tree, they had this Ernest Sneed in their tree. So again, I used my cousin calculator to try to figure out what would be our relationship. And so I put across, according if they were descended from Lily Matthews, of course, Ernest across, and then because DeE Sneed descends from James Arthur Sneed, and L. Sneed descends from Ernest Sneed. Ernest and James Arthur, they were brothers, I figured through research. So I put both of them in there and took it across. So it said that me and DeE Sneed should be second cousins, and I should be second cousin once removed to L. Sneed. And so again, I go over to DNA Painter and I put that in. And in fact, that's the relationship that it says that the possible relationship, that the probability of possible relationship that it would be. And I'm like, so that's how I was connecting with these two DNA matches. And so I finally figured out the connection to the Sneed line, because Johnny Sneed, which was Marion's father, his father was John Sneed and his mother was Josie Williams, in which I discovered also from other DNA matches that they descend from that same line for some of the other DNA matches that were considerably high DNA matches, but they descend from John Sneed and Josie Williams. So I was able to confirm that, but I was able to confirm the relationship to these 2D high DNA matches. And then also I talked about the fan club in the cluster research. I just wanted to put this in here. So I went in and started researching Will Matthew, his children. And so I started researching his son, Jonas Matthews. And I found Jonas's death certificate, and it said that he died of a homicide, that he was murdered. So I was like, let me go see if I can find a newspaper article, maybe about, what happened. And so that's when I found this newspaper article, and it says, victim of cutting affray on Saturday dies from wounds. And so I began to read it, and it says, Jonas Matthews, 19, the Negro who was carved up by John Frank Crockett, another Negro of about the same age, on Mink's slide late Saturday evening, died yesterday afternoon at the home of his father, Will Matthews, on the Manson Road, where he was taken immediately after the bloody fracas. And then the bottom portion says that Jonas Matthews, the victim of this affray, is the son of William Matthews, who has for many years been a laborer on the farm of Mr. A. Arch Smotherman, never having known any other home. Mr. Smotherman gives him a good name, stating that he had been steadily on the job and was a good worker. So I asked myself, when I seen that A. Arch Smotherman, I said, where have I seen that name before? I was like, where have I seen that name before? I said, I know I've seen it somewhere. Where have I seen that name? And then so I go back looking to see where I've seen that name. I did a search for it, and then lo and behold, in the 1920 census, you will see the household before William Matthews is this A.R. Smotherman. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And then so I was like, well, that ain't where I've seen the Smothering name. I've seen it somewhere else. And then so I was like, I know where I've seen it. I've seen the Smothering name on Marion and Clara White's marriage record. There's a R.H. Smotherman listed as a surety along with DeE Sneed on that marriage record. And I'm like, and I, in researching A.R. Smotherman, I found out that the H and the R are interchangeable. Some records is R.H. and some are H.R., but it's the same person. So I'm like, wow. So then I go and I search my DNA matches for the Smotherman surname, and there are Smotherman DNA matches. I don't know how they're connected or what's the connection, but I just thought that was cool, because in the other census also you'll find A.R. Smotherman also in the other censuses also. So that fan club will also give you clues into your research. And you want to make sure that you're searching all them people on them pages, because they might have a clue to, you know, to what you're looking for. But that is how I found Emma's mother and found a connection to the DNA matches.
Are there any questions for Adrian? I see comments. Wow, awesomeness, impressive, great presentation. Thank you for sharing. Are there any questions for Adrian at this time? So Vivian Chandler, Adrian is asking, where do we find the cousin calculator?
You can Google it, or well, actually, if you can put your emails in the chat, if you said there was a handout for the presentation, so I can send it to you and it'll have that information in there. But you can Google it, or you can go to I think you can, you can find it on, actually find it on Family Search also in their wiki, but you can Google it. That's how I got the copy that I have. But if you put your email, then I could send you the handout, and it'll have the exact the links to where you can find all the information.
And Adrian, is that the same for the shared CM project tool?
That's on DNApainter.com, and that is also information in the handout too.
There's a question from Deborah Norwood that I can answer. Her question is a general question. Are the presentations recorded for viewing later? Yes, they are recorded, and they are posted on our YouTube channel. There was a comment earlier. Let me find that. Maybe you can help this viewer. Let's see. Oh, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Okay, so Lisa Matthew Soto has had a brick wall since 2008. Lisa, are you still on the Zoom? Can you maybe give us some information about that brick wall? I don't think I see Lisa on the Zoom. There's a question about your handout. Will there be a handout, and how can people get the handout?
If you put your email in the chat, then I can email it to you. You can email it to you.
Gotcha. People are putting their hand out or their emails in the chat. Any other questions for Adrian? Or Adrian, do you have any tips for people who are interested in breaking down walls with DNA, or any tips about DNA since you're a DNA expert?
I wouldn't say I'm an expert.
Well, that's what we call you.
Yeah.
You've got more experience and expertise than the rest of us. How about that?
Yeah. My thing with DNA, you want to make sure that you, with your research, you want to make sure that you research and do as much research as possible. And then, like I said, when you building those family trees, you want to make sure that you build them out as far as you can. And then a lot of people, they just focus on their direct lines, but what you want to do is also research those collateral lines, because sometimes the what you're looking for is in those collateral lines. So you want to make sure you're building out your direct line plus those collateral lines out as far as you can get it in that way. So then when you do DNA tests, if you haven't already DNA tested, and like I said before, you want to make sure also when you DNA test that you're linking your tree to your DNA results, because that's going to help you too to get those shared common ancestor hints and things of that nature, and be able to see how your DNA matches are connecting to you. And then also, and like I said, in your DNA match list, there's that function where you can search by surname, or you can search by birth locations of people, in your DNA matches trees. And so that's very helpful too, searching that way, because if you know that, okay, your potential ancestor was born, say for instance, in Lawrence County, Georgia, you can put that particular place in the birth location on the search on the match list, and it'll give you all the DNA matches that have someone in their tree that lists that birth location. And so you can go in there and look and try to, figure out, what is if there's a connection. And then also those surnames, because that's what I did with the birch. I had to go in there and kind of sort it out, because like I said, most of the people in Lawrence County came off the birch plantation. So a lot of them took on the birch surname. Took on the birch surname. So you have to go in there and try to figure out who is what. So that's why I knew with these DNA matches that had these birches in their tree, they weren't connected with any other Cadwell relatives. So I was like, well, I know it can't be from that side. So and then so that's another way to do it. But you want to particularly pay attention to those high DNA matches, and like I said, just make sure you're doing the research and getting that together before, if you haven't DNA tested before you DNA test, so you can get more out of it. And then so there's a question: how can I tell if names are mother's or father's side of the family? And how you can do that is you make sure you're getting as many people tested as possible. And so that's how I was able to determine if a DNA match was coming from my mom's side or from the paternal side, because a lot of my maternal family has tested. So I know, okay, so if this person is matching this set of people, then it's from my mom's side. If they're not matching them, then it's possibly from my paternal side. So you want to make sure that you have test people, make sure people are tested from each side of your family, your paternal and your maternal side. So that's why I said you want to test as many people as possible. Get many people tested as possible.
There's another question. Have you or anyone here on the Zoom used Excel to catalog info on family tree members?
Well, I use Excel. I wouldn't per se the family members, but I use it as kind of like with my DNA matches to try to find out how a DNA matches could possibly be connecting. So what I do is I go in Excel and I know I've got all these DNA matches and they're coming from, and they have all this one particular surname. So I go in there and I go across and kind of do their pedigree chart in the Excel file. So that way I can go in there, I can see, okay, this DNA match is a descendant from this couple. Then I color code it and I say, okay, well, all these is coming from this one, and see if there's a connection. I guess it would be kind of like triangulation, but that's how I use Excel for my DNA matches. So I have all these surnames that are showing up in DNA matches. I do it in Excel. I have a tab for each surname.
Was it Cora?
And I'm looking to see if there's any other questions.
But I have a question. Was there something that the participants were expecting to learn or hear about that was not addressed?
Go ahead and repeat the question.
Was there anything that that the participants on here was expecting to learn or hear about that was not addressed?
Yeah, they're there, yeah.
I found a really cool red back. I think it's over there. And I found the RC land sailor.
Yep.
We need new batteries. And
No.
Adrian, you did a great job. This is Vivian talking.
Oh, thank you.
You did a great job. What frustrates me, and I'm sure other people run into this too, is those name patterns. There are so many people with the same names born at different times, and it is so hard to keep them straight. And so that's why I asked if you used Excel, because I go look at my tree and sometimes I have sons married to their mothers and it's a hot mess.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I do, because like I was stated about the DeE Sneed, how the descendants, like the sons all name their sons John, and the sons name their sons John. So how I went in and kind of differentiated them was I used Excel, and so I put all the sons going across and then all the Johns going down to try to figure out which one could be the John that I was looking for, how they were, connecting.
Right. Next time I see you in person, I want to look at your Excel worksheet so I can figure out how to set mine up.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. How many people will be interested in a hands-on DNA workshop? You show up in person, so I guess you would have to. Well, this will be an in-person thing for it to be hands-on, but yeah.
Well, here's a good question, Adrian. Michelle says she wishes she could, but she's in Michigan.
Michelle.
How could you do something, via Zoom for people who aren't here in Fort Wayne?
That's a good question. Michelle, she's in Michigan, so how would you do like something hands-on for someone that's not in Fort Wayne?
Thank you. I'm going to interrupt a little bit. This is Roberta. I think that it would be an excellent opportunity for a lot of people to really share what their real confusion is. We'd have to limit the workshop, and I think a remote capability is there as long as Adrian can see what it is that you're looking at to help you determine what you possibly are overlooking and guide you. But I think it would be an excellent opportunity for a lot of people who are hazed by this DNA drama, because it does create psychological drama at some point when you're trying to figure it all out and not knowing what it is that you're missing to look at. So proposal would be that we would have maybe several workshops, limiting the number of people in it. It could be included remotely with a small number of people, and then a small number of people in the room as well. We do have that capability here at the Allen County Public Library. So the question is, how many people would be interested with him assisting you with your brick walls through the society, a hands-on workshop?
A great presentation, Al, here. Thank you. I certainly would be, and willing to perform as well.
Great, great. Let's see, okay, do you have any suggestions? Okay, so here's a question. And it says, do you have any suggestions on research paths to take to find unknown family member brick wall? Example, grandmother never named who grandfather was. I'm slowly working through DNA matches and building connections that way. Yes, they have done DNA. So this is the answer to Stacy. So basically, the answer to your question is basically to build, to continue to work through those DNA matches, and then also to test as many people as possible. And then to look, like I said, in those high DNA matches, if you don't know who they are, that could possibly be a clue to maybe to finding that unknown family member. Like I said, those Sneed DNA matches, when I first done my DNA and I got my match list, they were showing up. So I'm like, well, I don't know who these people are. I don't have no Sneeds in my tree or in my research. I don't know who they are. And the reason why I didn't know who they were, because I was dealing with the MPE situation. So that's how I did not know who they were. But because they were high matches, I still went ahead and started researching them to try to figure out who they were. And then there were some other high DNA matches that descended from Clara May, which was my paternal grandmother from her side. And so when I started researching them, that's how I was able to figure out Clara May and Marion were my grandparents, because I started researching them. And those DNA matches gave clues, because I started looking at their trees and researching those people, finding obituaries and different things of that nature. And I was able to connect it. But I still couldn't find the connection to those high match Sneeds, because the other ones were descended from Clara's line, which is what my paternal father's mother's side. And the Sneeds is the paternal father's side, father's side. So I had to get through there and work it out. In an MPE situation is not parent expected. So that's what an MPE is, not parent expected. And a lot of people who have DNA tested some people have run into that type of situation. So that's what is not parent expected or non-paternal event. So in fact, you got Paul, not Paul. That's basically a short way to say it. Also, before we go, I don't know how we can do this, but we had a couple of door prizes.
Did I hear door prizes?
Yeah, that I wanted to do. So I don't know how we would do it. I guess, is there a way to see like the first two people to raise their hands?
Mm-hmm. I see Beth Swartz raised her hand and Michelle Mailer raised her hand. How many door prizes do you have?
2.
Okay, so the first two people to virtually raise their hand were Beth Schwartz and Michelle Mailer. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that.
It's Mahler. It's okay.
I wondered, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, thank you all for joining us.
So the door, and so
sorry.
if they could put their shirt size in there, because what the door prize is going to be is this. Can you see it? Let me turn off that back. You can see it. There's this shirt. It says all genealogists eventually come to their senses. So if they
Say that
put their-
again. What was that?
This is a door prize. All genealogists eventually come to their senses. It's a t-shirt. So if they put their t-shirts on in the chat.
This is Roberta Ridley, Chairwoman of the African American Genealogical Society of Fort Wayne. And on behalf of our amazing board and members of this society, I want to thank every last one of you for your participation, for the support of the society, encouraging you to continue to do the research, to give the voice to the ancestors. Your support and your participation is encouragement for us to keep digging and finding out ways to help all of us to develop the story that does give them that voice. Please, if you have suggestions on workshops that you think would be beneficial, that you haven't heard anything about, or that you don't know how to do a certain type of function, that we will be able to help you. Suggestions are always appreciated. We do have things scheduled, but suggestions are always appreciated. And I do wish you very Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy New Year's, because it'll be all of that before we actually see you on this format again. And again, God bless you all and be safe out there. And we look forward to our next gathering. Thank you so very much.